Let's bring in House Impeachment Manager Val Demings for a response this morning. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us this morning. The president added to Pat Cipollone's argument just a few minutes ago, saying his team absolutely shredded your case. Your response?
Well, good morning, George. It's good to be with you. And look, my message to the president and his lawyers after listening to their presentation on yesterday would be, regardless of what you say, the truth still matters. And the evidence against the president is overwhelming. If anyone was paying attention, and I know a lot of people were because I heard from a lot of people all over this nation, that the president used and abused the authority, the power of his office to try to coerce a foreign power into interfering in the 2020 election. And his team of lawyers can try to distort and try to deflect. But quite frankly, the best witness that we have in this case is the President of the United States.
Let me get into some of the evidence they put forward yesterday and the facts that they put forward yesterday, from especially from White House counsel Mike Purpura. He said there were 6 key facts that bolstered the president's case. Here are a couple of them.
First, the transcript shows that the president did not condition either security assistance or a meeting on anything. Fourth, not a single witness testified that the president himself said that there was any connection between any investigations and security assistance, a presidential meeting, or anything else.
They kept saying that Ambassador Gordon Sondland only presumed that link.
Well, let me say this. We know that in the initial call with President Zelensky between he and President Trump, the president dangled the offer of a White House meeting before President Zelensky and did it again on the July 25th call, understanding for this new incoming young president, very promising president of Ukraine, that a meeting in the Oval Office would send a major message to especially Russia. But let's look at the facts, George, because I know that sometimes the other side seems to struggle with that. But the facts are, when President Zelensky said, or thanked President Trump for the assistance in defense, and then mentioned the fact that they were ready to purchase additional javelins, President Trump said, but I need you to do us a favor, though. Now, let's just imagine, as you know, I was a former police chief. If we had just been awarded federal money to, say, combat terrorism in our community, and I made a phone call to my member of Congress to thank him for supporting that funding and said that we're just about ready to purchase emergency equipment. And the congressman said to me, yeah, but I need you to do us a favor, though. Would you engage in an investigation against my political opponent and basically interfere in the election? I think that would be pretty clear to just about everybody that that was wrong. And it's quite frankly what President Trump did.
Well, one of the
and
points
so the attorneys can say there is no connection or correlation at all. I say otherwise, and I think the information is otherwise.
Well, one of the points the president's let me just interrupt you there, though. One of the points the president's team made is that those Javelin missiles weren't actually even suspended. That aid wasn't held up. It was a different tranche of aid.
I understand what the president's attorneys are saying, but we have to go back to what President Trump's intentions were on the call that day and what President Zelensky heard. I also know that there's been quite an effort to say, well, the Ukrainians were not even aware that there was a hole on the military aid. But we also know there's testimony and supporting documentation that that just is not true. The information about the quid pro quo, we know there are several witnesses who testified that there were. But I'm reminded, too, of Michael Cohen's, remember the president's former personal attorney, who's sitting in prison. One of the things that he said was that the president talks in codes, but everybody around him understands what he means. And if you remember, one of the witnesses, Ambassador Sondland, said that, yeah, that the president, it was as clear as 2 + 2 = 4. And so while they are asking us, I believe, and the American people to not believe our lying eyes and our lying ears, I do believe that the information, the testimony, when you put it all together, is as clear as 2 + 2 = 4.
In order to get a vote on witnesses, you're going to need to win over 4 Senate Republicans, including Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Yet this week, she sounded fairly skeptical in an interview on CNN. I want to show it right here. She said the House made a decision that they didn't want to slow things down by having to go through the courts, and yet now they're basically saying, you guys got to go through the courts. We didn't, but we need you to. She's basically saying you want the Senate to do the job you didn't do.
George, let me say this, and I think everybody who's been paying attention knows now that the president refused to cooperate in any way with the House's investigation. Not only did he prevent current administration officials from testifying, but he prevented former administration officials from testifying and did not give one single document to help. Now, you know, for me, I think if you're innocent and you have witnesses that can support your innocence or documentation, you would freely be willing to hand that over. But let me say this. All of the senators, as you know, they've taken their original oath when they were sworn into office, but then they had to go one step forward and take an oath that they will do impartial justice. One thing I can say, I have been in the room with them all week this week for some pretty long days, and I know that they're in their seats, they're listening, many of them are taking notes, and I would expect them to do what they have taken an oath and sworn that they would do. And I'm just not going to give up on the Senate, and I'm not going to draw any conclusions, although I know there's a lot of speculation about what they may do or may not do. I'm not going to draw any of the conclusions. My job is to present all of the facts and as much information as we possibly can. And I would think, finally, I'll say this, if they are interested in understanding the complete truth, then they would be willing, like every other trial and in every other courtroom across this country, because they are judges, by the way, that they would want to hear from witnesses and see documentation that can support this case.
If the Senate refuses to vote for witnesses, will the House subpoena John Bolton?
Let me say this again, George, I'm just not going to speculate about it. I would think that, you know, there was a lot of talk over the last few days about what's reasonable or what makes common sense. I would expect that the senators would want to vote in favor of witnesses and supporting documentation. Remember, this is about hearing the complete story. While the evidence that we have is overwhelming in our case, and I think the American people clearly know that now, if you want to hear the complete truth, the complete story about what the president did or did not do, then you certainly want to hear from additional witnesses with direct knowledge, like Chief of Staff Mulvaney, who said, yeah, that the aid was tied, with the withholding the aid was tied to the DNC server, i.e. 2016 election. You'd want to hear from John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, who at the time said, if you remember, described the scheme as a drug deal.
Congresswoman?
He certainly got my attention with those words, and I think the senators would want to hear from him.
Thank you for your time this morning. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.